Well, welcome everybody to Healing Within Louisville. I'm Jessica Tanzel. I'm one of the co-owners of Healing Within Louisville. We are a collaborative healing center, so we have a lot of different things that we offer here. So I'm a psychic medium. I lead spiritual retreats. My partner and co-owner, Katie Gangler, I'm going to let her begin. She is a mental health therapist and works with all levels of people, couples, kids, all kinds of different topics. Yeah. And we also have coaches here. We have intuitive artists. We've got energy healers. We have an accountant. We have crystals, and we have massage therapy.
It's a one-stop shop.
Massage, yes, it is. So it's been a journey, and so we love bringing other people in and getting to collaborate. And tonight we are collaborating with Plant Prana. So I am going to pass it over to Kristi Forrest.
I'll scoot over.
Hi, welcome, Kristi.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. And again, we are about collaborating and cross-pollinating and sharing all of our gifts so that everyone can take the information that we have and help people heal. That's what we're here to do. Yeah. So I am grateful to share one of my big life teachers, Greg Toews of Plant Prana, as well as many other things that I won't go into because we've got more to talk about than that. But he is a clinical aromatherapist, pranic healer. The list goes on. We'll leave it with that. But he has done thousands of hours of clinical work, so with psychological as well as physical. So he's definitely able to help us talk about the stress and anxiety issues, as well as even this weekend's class, which is on pain management.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to get our cameras flipped around here. Okay, give me just a second. Might need your help with that one. Yeah. Do you know how to flip the camera?
From here? Do you know how to flip this?
I mean, I can just turn it around.
You'll have to turn around.
Cool. Okay.
Is that all right?
That's beautiful. Hi, Greg.
Hey, everybody. So we are going to be talking about stress, anxiety. Sometimes that leads to eventually sleep issues, sleep disorders, and just the mechanics of it, and then how to address it. You know, a lot of times we're looking at these things through different modalities, and the modality goes through and looks at it from their point of view. But we want to look at it just like this center is very multifaceted. We want to look at it at a very multifaceted way as far as causes, and then also how to treat it. Once you kind of understand the mechanics, then you can use different tools to do kind of some of the same things. And so we want to understand what is exactly happening when there is stress, what exactly is happening when there's anxiety. So the very first thing that we're looking at is, you know, in these circles, in holistic circles, you hear of the mind, body, spirit, or soul connection, right? So one of the things that we have to take into account is these things are separate only in our mind, right? The way our mind perceives this is that these aspects are separate. When you have a physiological issue, it produces an emotional response and then eventually has some impact with your connection to the soul. When you have a deep soul connection, you have a deep realization. Part of what happens when you have realization, what happens? You sit there, you have the realization, and you'll start to have tears come down your face. Not necessarily in a bad way. You're having tears of joy or tears of realization, but what is happening is you're having this deeper soul experience, and then there is, boom, a shock to the body, right? The body is being shocked by what is happening. And so when we go through and look at this, if you have a physical issue, it doesn't eventually become psychological. It is psychological as well. And so the more that we understand this mechanism, the easier it becomes to treat stress and the easier it becomes to treat anxiety, right? So if we look at stress, you know, one time I was talking to a therapist who was going into businesses, and I said, you know, she was going in to treat stress, and I said, what is stress? And she goes, stress. And I said, but what is it? And she goes, it's stress. It's stress. The feelings that you get, it's stress. And I was like, but mechanically, what is it? And so, that's the thing sometimes is we don't really know exactly. We know the feeling, we know the experience, but we don't understand the physiology or the psychology of what's happening when something like stress happens. A lot of times we take this as a psychological event, and it actually really starts more in your physiology. Your body is always trying to maintain a balance in its environment. It's also trying to maintain a balance internally, right? And so stress is anytime you are being pushed out of that balance, right? So even when you're doing something good, something that you are pursuing, right? You are being pushed out of balance because you're having to shift or change, where your body and your physiology is always trying to maintain a balance with the environment and within. So when you are experiencing stress, it is basically a type of displacement that happens because of a shift or a change. So a perfect example of this is you have this mechanism in your physiology of maintaining your eyes at a horizontal level, right? And so if you elevate your shoulder for some injury, for example, you don't walk around like this all day. Your body goes, okay, let's adjust. I'm gonna go like this so I can keep my eyes horizontal and I can function in nature, right? So a week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, a month goes by, and the body has done the adjustments so that now this is the new you, right? This is the new you. It is balancing. This mechanism doesn't judge good or bad. It just says, I'll balance whatever is happening. So you're walking around with your shoulder like this, your head is adjusted, and then you get some chiropractic or some massages or something, and you start to try to put the shoulder back. Your body actually resists that, right? It resists it because it is trying to balance what has already happened, right? So because of this, when you start to shift the body to even out the shoulders, your body doesn't go, this is going to bring relief. Your body goes, why are you making me do all this paperwork? I have to shuffle this around and do this. Like this causes a type of a stress response. So when you look at stress, we actually break stress down into 4 segments, right? 4 segments or 4 pieces of activity, right? First is the initial action, the incident, right? The red flag goes up. There has been something that happened that has pushed you out of balance, right? So a lot of times this is, it could be a deadline, it could be an incident, it could be something negative. It's just your body's being pushed out of balance. Now, what happens here is in this stage, your body goes into a protective reaction, right? A protective reaction. So if you think how your body thinks, what is the very first thing that your body tries to protect? The internal organs and the neck, right? So your neck tightens up and your throat and your internal organs tighten up. So this involves a lot of what you would call smooth muscle, right? Your muscles that move your body is skeletal muscle. They're voluntary, the movement is voluntary nervous system activity, right? Smooth muscle is tied to involuntary responses. So you start to have tension in the digestive tract and you start to have tension in the neck and in your upper part of your respiratory tract. So right there, your body is trying to protect itself. And what starts to happen is just that starts to affect your fight-flight mechanism, right? Just that action produces adrenaline or epinephrine or epinephrine. So with that, you are already in a stress response before the next 3 steps happen, right? Your body, remember, doesn't go, okay, we've had this event, now let's go back to normal, like the shoulder going back to normal. So there's tension in the gut, there's tension in the respiratory tract. After the event is over, your body doesn't go, let's relax the smooth muscle of the digestive tract. Let's relax the respiratory tract. What it does is it just says, we're on red alert. Let's just stay on red alert. This is the new me, right? That right there is a major source of anxiety. Most anxiety is actually physiological in nature, not psychological in nature. It eventually becomes psychological. This is why it's such a profound thing to treat, is when you go through and treat it, it's not about your psychological response, it is about your emotional response. So this is one of the examples I like to give, is you touch your hand to a hot stove, right? You don't go, okay, intellectually, I know that this is probably causing tissue damage and, I should probably remove my hand and take it away before there's too much tissue damage. You go, ow, right? You take your hand away very quickly. Your body produced a physiological emotion, right? It produced a physiological emotion. So you have emotions that are physiological in nature, and you have emotions that are psychological in nature. Your body generates emotion for you to take action in the environment, right? It helps you to thrive. It helps you to survive. It helps protect you in nature, right? So in this first state, this physiological emotional response gets triggered. Now, if you look at it from the point of view of psychology, whenever you think something, you produce an emotion. Whenever you feel something, you produce a thought, right? So here you've had this event. Let's say it's just even touching the hot stove and you go, ow, right? You have the burn. So you have a physiological response that makes you remove your hand from the stove. Eventually, that emotion becomes a thought process. So a lot of times when you want to differentiate between physiological thinking and emotions and psychological thinking and emotions, is psychological thinking and emotions has depth to it. Like when you think about it, you can go, okay, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. In a week I can do this, and a week I can do that. I can have a conversation with this person. I can take this action. I might have to make a choice. Physiological emotions, because they are to motivate the body, right? They're to motivate the body to take action. It feels like it's all or nothing, right? Whatever is happening feels like it's happening forever. Like it's not going to change. I need to take immediate action to get out of the situation. It's if I'm in pain, I'm going to be in pain for the rest of my life. If I'm upset, I'm going to be upset for the rest of my life. If I'm scared, I'm going to be scared for the rest of my life. When you feel that feeling, it is your physiology, not your psychology. You're not thinking it, you're actually generating that from the body. So this first stage of stress actually is the thing that eventually will cause anxiety, right? So let's talk about the 4 stages of stress first, and then we'll come back and we'll revisit this first stage, right? So the first stage is you have an incident happen. You have the red flag go up. There is, I've touched the hot stove, and I need to take action, right? Okay, then the next phase, stage 2, is then you're establishing what value this has, right? You're trying to figure out, what does this mean to me? Okay, does this mean that my hand needs to be in ice water? I'm not going to be able to use my hand anymore. I'm not going to be able to work on Monday. What does it mean? So the second stage of stress is really dependent on that first stage, right? When you get really super agitated in the first stage, the hypotheticals can go to really crazy places. If you're able to keep yourself calm in times of stress in that first stage, your ability to evaluate what does this mean becomes a little bit more refined, because you're able to bring in your psychological aspects and not purely just a physiological response, right? So there's the event, and then you're establishing value, right? Then the third phase is, what is the strategy that I need to put in place? What do I do about this, right? So you go back to the burnt hand, I put ice on it, I put water on it, I go to the doctor, whatever you're going to do, right? So you start thinking of the action plan, right? And so again, if the first phase of the stress response is super, super agitated, then the second one, the hypotheticals usually go a little bit crazier. Then the strategy becomes even crazier, right? Because you're not seeing it for what it is. Think of it like this. When you have psychological issue, then you can go through and process it, and you can release it by processing the content of what happened. When it's physiological in nature, all you're dealing with is systems in the body that are agitated. There's no content, it's agitated. And so the thing you have to do is you have to calm down that agitation. Otherwise, you're always dealing with what's in front of you and the agitation that has accumulated from the past, right? So you're seeing it through the eyes of here, and you're seeing it through the eyes of the past, right? So with this, by going through and calming down the physiology, eventually there might be a little bit of a story that needs to be processed. But if you don't unwind the physiology, as much as you work it from a psychological point of view, it's really hard to change the physiology. It's not due to your thinking. It's not due to your emotions. It's due to agitation that happens in your physiology. It's the equivalent of the shoulder going up, but in your nervous system, in your immune system, in your endocrine system. Those are usually the three main places, by the way. All three of those systems have a sort of memory, right? It remembers what happens so that it can prevent suffering in the future, right? So basically, it kind of never forgets, right? Not never, but kind of. So first phase, there's an incident. Second phase is, what does this mean? Third is, what do I do about it? And then fourth is taking action, right? So if you want to have good stress management, really the phase that you really want to look at is phase 1 and phase 2. If you treat phase 1 and phase 2 well, then phase 3 and phase 4 go much, much easier. But if you're always looking at phase 3 and phase 4, you're never really undoing that physiological response. And it gets more agitated, gets more agitated, gets more agitated, gets more agitated. So again, if you think about it from this point of view, we're just going to do something. Some of you are here and some of you are on Facebook and streaming, so you probably don't have essential oils in front of you. So we're just going to do a simple exercise. When you have that first incident, remember what I said, the smooth muscle of the gut tightens up, but also your throat. Your body is protecting these two areas because these are, in your physiology, these two are the areas where there can be the most damage done quickly. So if there's some sort of threat coming in, it could be your boss yelling at you, by the way. This tightens up, this tightens up, right? These two things go to a protective mode, right? So eventually what happens is you start to develop short, rapid breathing, right? Your bronchioles go into a little bit of a spasm. You start to have a little bit of a shorter breath. It starts to be more rapid. And this has been clinically proven to produce anxiety. They can take somebody who has no anxiety, put them on a breathing machine, start to shorten their breath and make it more rapid, and they can produce anxiety and then eventually produce a panic attack, right? With no history of anxiety. So your breath plays a key role to this, but so does the digestive tract. So one of the things that we'll have you do is think of something right now that just produces a little bit of a stress response. It could be driving in traffic, it could be something at work, it could be something at home. You're not going to have to talk about it, so just think about it for a moment and just see how it feels, see how it resonates with you, see how we get triggered a little bit with that. It's not happening, but we can go back to the event, which means it's still some agitation in the body that's tied to that. Okay? And so usually we use four essential oils to go through and treat these 4 phases. But here's a trick that you can do even without an essential oil. So you want to relax the bronchioles. You want to relax basically the air passages so that it changes your breathing pattern, right? So you do this thing that is referred to as pursed lip breathing. Pursed lip breathing. So what you do is you inhale through your nose, and then you hold your breath, and then you make your lips really tight and just like a little tiny hole right in the middle, and you force the air out through your tight lips. So you basically go. So there's a way to test to see how tight your bronchioles are. Like if you're having anxiety, if you're having high stress levels, you should check this on a regular basis. Because just because you treat it now doesn't mean that it doesn't come back, right? So one of the things that you do is you take a long, slow, deep breath through your nose, and then you hold your breath, and then you try to exhale even slower than your inhalation, right? So if you go really slow, and then you go, right? Now, if you have tight bronchioles, this is what happens. You inhale, you go, and then you go, okay, now long, slow exhalation, and then you go, right? Because they're in spasm. You can't control them, right? So this is actually built into some spiritual traditions. In the Buddhist tradition, they have a conch shell where they sit and they try to blow the conch shell to make a particular sound. In the Jewish tradition, they have this certain kind of horn that's like a spiral horn, and you have to blow really super hard on it to make this really sound. Basically, you have to use pursed lip breathing to do this. So part of why they do this is by changing how you breathe, it actually starts to help you tap into higher states of mental faculties, right? A lot of times what happens is we're coming from a place of lower mental faculties, which would be your concrete mind. It's the part that sees everything in pieces, it sees details, it has to do with your past experiences, and it learns from the school of hard knocks, right? Then you have abstract thinking. Abstract thinking is starting to see things that are new or abstract, forming strategies. You're able to see consequences. You're making decisions usually in this place, right? Then even higher is you start to tap into the intuitive mind, right? The intuitive mind starts to tap into things that you're not necessarily aware of consciously, but unconsciously you are aware of. This is very similar to what happens when you're dreaming or when somebody has intuition about something, right? Your concrete mind is based on information purely from the senses, except it can receive marching orders from the unconscious, right? And so with this, the more that you're able to reach states of peace and stillness in the body, it starts a chain reaction. This is actually the foundation for alchemy, right? People think of alchemy as like kind of doing things that break the law of nature. It's actually based on the laws of nature. And what you're doing is you're setting something in motion in the physiology that eventually makes you much more conductive to the higher soul. It changes your psychological processing, and it makes you more conductive to the higher soul. So think of it like this. When you breathe, you take a deep breath. In that deep breath, the seed for exhalation is there. You don't have to make it happen. It's just there, right? As you exhale, as you're exhaling, the seed for inhalation is there. You don't have to make it happen. It just happens. So as you inhale, the seed for exhalation is there. As you exhale, the seed for inhalation is there. So this is the foundation for meditation. This is the foundation for alchemy. If you calm the body down, the seed for greater emotional activity is there, right? So you have higher emotions, you have lower emotions. Your lower emotions are tied to your physiology. Your higher emotions are tied to the heart and your psychology. Now the heart actually will transmute the lower emotions, right? So the way that you go through and deal with those emotions generated by the body is you activate the heart, or you get them to the heart. Right? So in the physical stillness, a seed for greater emotional activity is there, which means you're now starting to transmute the emotions that are there. Eventually what happens is the emotional body gets still and calm. So then the seed for greater mental activity is there. Think about it. Haven't you ever had a situation where somebody came and got mad at you and kind of chewed you out, and you were not really upset about anything, but after they left, it was like a day or two before you could have like clear thinking. Like you were trying to put pen to paper or form a thought, and it was very, very hard. It's because the emotional body was super agitated, even though it wasn't because of you, right? So when there starts to be greater levels of heart activation, the emotional body starts to calm down, the seed for greater mental activity is there. Then when the mental body calms down, the chatter in the head stops, the seed for greater spiritual activity is there, right? That mental chatter is your physiology, right? It is your endocrine system functioning through your brain. That's it. It's not bad habits that you have. It's not weird thinking that you have. You're simply dealing with your physiology is going bap, 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 bap in your brain, and you just can't quiet it down. Even if you think about it, like you emotionally and mentally want to do something, you go to start to do it, what happens? You start having difficulty. Your body doesn't like change. Your body resists any sort of shift or change. It's constantly trying to maintain homeostasis, which means balance, right? So what happens is this idea of maintaining balance can become so agitated that the person becomes very, very rigid, right? Very, very rigid. So we're going to go through and just do this one little step with the pursed lip breathing, and let's just see how this makes you feel. Okay, so gently inhale through your nose, hold your breath, purse your lips together really tight, and then force out the air. And then again, long, slow, deep breath in, hold your breath, and then make your lips really super tight, and then force the air out. And then one more time, long, slow, deep breath. Tighten the lips, and then force the air out. Okay, with that, just be still, keep your eyes closed for a second, and just let it incubate for a moment. Okay, inhale again. Hold your breath. And then force it out through your tight lips. And then again, inhale. And then force it out again. Now just be still. What do you notice? Go ahead, anybody can just go ahead and speak up, or do they have to unmute themselves? Or...
Let me take a look.
I don't see anything on here.
No questions at this time.
Anybody want to share their experience though? Yeah, you want to share your experience?
I'm a huge fan of hugs. I love hugs. I have to have hugs every day, and it felt just like after holding like a 20-second hug.
Yeah,
for me.
so somebody here said it felt like a 20-second hug. And so you notice like all of a sudden your body felt a little bit more relaxed and your thinking like kind of quieted down a little bit, right? That's not even using an oil yet. The oil makes it much stronger. Yes.
Trish says she feels resistance.
Resistance to do it?
Trish, can I unmute you? Would you be cool to talk? I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to ask to unmute you, or you can type in the chat.
Yeah, I just felt resistance to, I guess, just let it go, but I have that issue anyway.
Yeah. You do have that issue kind of consistently? Do you have a lot of anxiety?
Yes, I do have a lot of anxiety, so I probably have to do that breathing for quite a while to actually feel the relief.
But what I was just saying is like the thing with anxiety is the body gets used to it. And
Yeah.
so you try to get rid of the anxiety and your body is like, but this is us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, you know, you don't have to do it all at once. I would say do little bits at a time, but that resistance is, you can already start to feel that there's like a shift or a change that's starting to happen that will eventually also affect the psychology. You know, it will basically kind of quiet your mind a little bit. And so it's your physiology kind of resisting it a little bit.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, I think this is the thing that's really good about this is people think that it's a choice that they're making or it's a thought process that they're doing, when really what you're wrestling with a lot of times is actually some physiology. And once you unwind the physiology, then the psychology becomes much easier to go through and process. You know, and so even if there's an issue that's underlying that might be causing some of the anxiety, you reduce the physiological anxiety, and then the psychological part you go through and you're able to process. You know, people are smart. People have the ability to release things, move past things. It's the body that is so stubborn. You know, it can be very, very stubborn. And so really it's just kind of getting the body in line. And once the body is in line, then the psychological components become easier to treat. So when, I mean, you guys on the streaming are not here, but we're going to use an oil that is used for.
So anybody on my Facebook Live here, this is Kristi. If you have any oils, you can type them in and let me see what you have.
Like we're going to use an oil called tarragon. So tarragon's used in cooking. It's used for all kinds of things in the kitchen. But here we use tarragon for, on one level, we use it for shock. Like when somebody goes into shock or has difficulty with stress reactions or even being triggered, then tarragon is one of the things that we use. One of the things that's very good about tarragon is it is an antispasmodic. And it is an antispasmodic not to the skeletal muscle, but actually to the smooth muscle of both the gut and of the respiratory tract. So as you start to take long, slow, deep breaths, what you're doing is you're relaxing the smooth muscle of the respiratory tract and you're starting to relax the gut. So really all you're having to do is just take some long, slow, deep breaths with the tarragon and then just let it do what it does. So unfortunately, we can't do that for you guys there, but you're getting a different way of doing the pursed lip breathing. You know, you're basically relaxing. So everybody here, just take long, slow, deep breaths, and maybe they can just hear your responses from inhaling the tarragon. Are your people okay?
Yeah. I'm just trying to see. I don't see if anyone's typed in the chat. I'm trying to find it. People are questions at this time.
And you guys are taking long, slow, deep breaths. I know it kind of it's a little, smells a little bit like black licorice a little bit. Yes.
I was like, what is this? I saw this was a child. I know. I'm like,
We'll take a few more long, slow, deep breaths. Okay, and just be still for a second. And the people here, anybody want to share your experience? What do you notice when you inhale the tarragon?
my muscles really relaxed.
Muscles started to relax, even muscles in your skeletal muscles, like your shoulders will start to go down. So here's the thing, is like if you look at like something like back pain, you know, like this weekend we're doing a class on back pain. And one of the things that gets really overlooked when treating something like back pain or neck pain is the tension in the gut and the tension in the respiratory tract. And so, for example, we had somebody just a couple weeks ago who has had long-term back pain, and she gets chiropractic adjustment. She lays on a little ball that she pops her neck, sometimes or her back. Sometimes she just has to lay on the ground to let her back relax. And so we gave her like a form of what we just used, and she said about 80% of her back pain went away with just like inhaling it a few times. And so a lot of it was she had some anxiety and she had a lot of tension in her gut. We took the tension out of the gut away and the back muscles relaxed. So it wasn't, the anxiety wasn't causing it. The anxiety was a byproduct of what happened. Anytime your body is in pain, it produces anxiety. Anytime. I mean, there's just no way around it. And so that would also hold true for psychological pain. When there's psychological pain present, it will produce anxiety in your body. Right? And so sometimes what happens is we have like maybe an old trauma or something that's happened, or go through and processing it, and because it's been there for so long, the pain's been there for so long, the body is reacting. So as you go through and calm this down, all of a sudden the thing that felt like a big giant monster is really just a cockroach that you can crush with the heel of your shoe. You know, it becomes not so big because you're calming down the physiology. So as soon as you calm down the physiology, you're able to go to a psychological place and go, I can process my way through this. I can talk my way, you know, I can talk this out with somebody and I can resolve this issue. Where if you're constantly wrestling with your physiology, then the next thing that happens is you just get more anxiety, you stop sleeping. The emotions get cleaned up by the heart. Your mental chatter gets cleaned up by touching the unconscious. And so when there's a lot of tension in the gut, and when there's a lot of tension in the respiratory tract, your dreams start to diminish and the intensity of your processing in dream time diminish. So your ability to let go of the repeated thought patterns, the negative thinking, the being self-critical, all those kinds of thought processes, they get released when you touch the unconscious aspect of your mind. Remember, your lower mind is constantly just working on your sensory information, right? Your unconscious has an awareness of other things that are much greater than your senses. And so for your mind to be able to make a shift, it actually has to touch that unconscious aspect. Does that make sense? And so by going through and doing this, you're really starting to lay the groundwork for, put it like this. Haven't you ever been doing something and you get triggered like in a negative way and you're like, ugh, and I get stressed out, I get upset, I got angry, you know, and you don't even really know why you got triggered, you just got triggered, right? When you're able to calm down your physiology, the heart gets more activated, you're able to touch the unconscious. You still get triggered, but the triggers sometimes are how to resolve it. You'll have a flash of insight. You'll get triggered to go like, this is the next thing I need to do. It's not a negative trigger. It actually starts to become a positive trigger. The triggers are always going to be there. But what you want to do is you want to take them from taking you into that negative tailspin to being triggered to like, aha, I had a realization. I know how to handle this. Because what you're doing is you're starting to touch the unconscious. Right? Your body also has an unconscious, like your mental faculties. And so you're basically choosing which unconscious you're tapping. You know, in the shamanic tradition, they used to, well, they still say it, but they say you have two dogs inside. You have two dogs. You have a good dog and a bad dog. Which dog are you going to feed? Right? That's the question that's posed. And really, those two dogs are the unconscious of the body and the unconsciousness of the mind. You know, your higher intuitive faculties. And so, by going through and calming down the gut and calming down the breath, you're actually starting to increase your ability to touch the unconscious of the mind. Right? So that means meditation becomes easier. That means doing talk therapy, you work through it and you release it and it's kind of done. Right? You're able to release it and move on. Like think of even times where you're trying to release a trauma or you're trying to forgive somebody. You know, until you move it out of the body and up into the psychology, the body will always try to remember. Think of it like this. Your brain is constantly trying to predict the future. It's trying to avoid pain and trying to cultivate something that's comfortable or of pleasure, right? And so when we have these experiences, your body doesn't want to let go of the negative experience because it never wants to experience it again. It sounds really weird, but there's memory mechanisms that's exactly their job, is to hold on to that piece of information. And then it's like, don't worry, you can release it psychologically. We'll never forget, right? We'll always remember. We'll always remind you. And so like, how do you get around that? Like how do you overcome that? Because it is physiological. It's not psychological. You have to re-educate those three systems that have a memory. You basically just have to reboot the memory mechanisms in those three systems. And so when we go through and we look at how to treat this, we're using it with plants, but you could use this with energy work. You could use this with, when I first did this, like 25, 30 years ago, whatever it was, we were approaching it actually with osteopathic principles. And then we started bringing plants into the mix. And then we started bringing energy work into the mix. And then we started bringing other things into the mix. And this was done in conjunction with a group of psychologists. And so we were treating different conditions, and we were looking at it from the point of view of treating it psychologically and also treating the physiology. And we were getting remarkable results. The issue there is that it has to be a very multifaceted approach. You know, so you see like this center here has multiple facets to it. It has all kinds of different kinds of therapists and therapies to choose from. And what that is you're starting to look at the different aspects and approaching healing from many different directions, because usually a single discipline doesn't resolve the physiology, the psychology, and the spirituality of the event that's happening. You know, so a lot of times, you know, you'll get a practitioner who's really good at one thing, but then you need to maybe shift and get something from the psychologist or maybe some meditation or something along that lines. And so when I was going through and doing this many years ago, it was a group of really smart psychologists, and they just had this realization that like there's something else that's going on. They said, God, what was the words they used? They basically said we need to rewire the brain, and we don't know how. Like, you know, they were treating trauma. They were like, we need to be able to do something with the brain. We don't know how. And so an osteopath and myself were called in to help assist. And you know, it's not always the nervous system. It's not always your brain. Your first point of response actually is your immune system. And so that's why you see like people who have really severe traumas, if you follow them along a couple of years out, they usually have really poor immune systems. They're on hypervigilance for a super long period of time, and then there's nothing left. You know, it's like if you stayed up 3 or 4 nights in a row, and then all of a sudden somebody came over and goes, okay, let's have a really good conversation. Got nothing left, right? And so, again, with trauma, one of the things you have to do is you have to also treat the immune system, not just stimulating it, you actually have to calm it down. So the next step that we do in phase 2, there's several different oils that we can use, but this is one that's very common. And you can put it on your skin, or you can put it on, we'll put it on these things just for everybody. Palo Santo. And so here we're going to do Palo Santo. And so sometimes, like you see in like bookstores or things, you'll see those little pieces of wood of Palo Santo. Even that will work. You can sit and like that and just kind of smudge yourself with the Palo Santo. This is a Palo Santo essential oil, and the oil is very strong, just a couple of drops. That's usually all it takes. And then you just take long, slow, deep breaths. Palo Santo is in the frankincense family, and so it's a wood that comes out of Central and South America. It's very healing. They use it before they go into ceremony, for healing ceremonies or spiritual ceremonies. So here we're just having people take long, slow, deep breaths.
She really puts a good way.
You get all
You need
this
a
left.
little. Clear it over there.
So we have them just taking long, slow, deep breaths of Palo Santo. A lot of times in this phase, we'll talk about this more from an energetic point of view. You know, we're talking about physiology, but we could have the same conversation, but from the point of view of energy, right? And so a lot of what you're doing here is you're disconnecting from the event. It doesn't mean desensitizing. It just means your initial physiological emotion is being diminished so that you can kind of not be reactive, and you can be a little bit more cognitive. You know, basically you get to be yourself rather than your body getting to call the shots, right? You don't get in your car and go, okay, take me to the store. You drive the car. And what happens in trauma in that initial event is the body takes over to protect itself, and your mental and emotional faculties and the soul really don't get to have a lot of say-so in what the body does until the body calms down. So basically you're trying to break a wild horse, trying to get it to calm down. And then as it calms down, then you get to see, what does this really mean? Like I had this situation where I had been working for this company for, I don't know, let's say 15 years. It's probably a little bit longer, but let's say 15. And so, you know, over a little period of time, I started becoming aware, like, okay, I'm being handed my hat, like I'm on my way out. And so you know, your initial response is, okay, I'm upset about this. Like I'm starting to stress out. I'm starting to have my reaction. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, I'm not happy. I don't like the people who I work with. I don't like the things that they do. I don't want to be like them. I don't like, you know, I went through all the I don't likes and I was like, okay, so I'm trying really hard to figure out why I'm upset. Okay, so now let's go through. Now I'm stepping away and I'm doing something that's more successful, like significantly more successful. I'm getting to be my own boss. I've broken out of a contract that I couldn't get out otherwise. Okay, I'm still trying to figure out why I'm upset. Like, I mean, I sat for like 2 days going through like, there's got to be a reason why I'm so upset. And I was like, no, there's no good reason. The only thing that I could come up with is that I didn't choose it. And what I chose was bad for me. So like, poor baby, I didn't get my way and do something that was causing me to suffer. I didn't get my way there and I got forced into doing something that was much better for myself. I was like, I can't believe it, but like all this time, like I was so stressed out about the shift or the change that I didn't allow something bigger or greater to come into my life because it was simply different. That's it. And psychologically, it's all I could think about is like, oh, one day it'll be different. Emotionally, I would love something different. My body, not having it, right? Not having it at all. And so, you know, even understanding these mechanisms doesn't mean that you're immune from this process. It doesn't. It makes you have the realization quicker so that you can step out of your physiology and step into your psychology. So the ones that inhaled the Palo Santo, how do you feel right now? Think of something that's like stressful or would trigger you like from last week, last month, you know, that irritating person, you know, Uncle Bob or whoever it is at Thanksgiving. How does it feel? Like you notice you're almost like, I don't know what to think.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? You notice that you don't have that triggered thinking that causes you to go like, I need to do this and I need to do that. You just go, it's a very interesting thing. When the mind gets quiet, you don't get sleepy, you get observant. You actually start observing the things around you, and then you can take things in, and then you can actually make choices. But when you're in that stress state, you're trying to put a fire out. You're not really looking at what's around you. You're just looking at, how do I stop this pain? How do I stop this suffering? How do I stop this anxiety? What do I need to do to make this stop? How do I step off this merry-go-round? And as soon as the mind starts to quiet down, somebody can literally say to you, what are you thinking? And you could go, nothing. Like, I'm not thinking about anything. But you're still aware, you're still processing information, you're still taking information in. And if somebody asks you a question, you wouldn't be sleepy, you would be able to respond with the information, right? So when the mind quiets down, when the mind stops to have the chatter, basically you're calming down the endocrine system and the brain, and it allows for the mind with a big M, like your higher mental faculties, to come in and start to take hold of the mental body. Once this happens, there is a very big level of stillness, mental stillness. Like your mind just quiets everything down. It quiets the emotions down. It actually even starts to quiet the body down somewhat. But first, you have to start with calming down the body. Right? So before we do the next phase, any questions, both here and on the stream?
Any questions on Facebook?
I'm a chatterbox, so if you let me go, I'll keep talking.
Is this a really good one for meditation?
Yeah, you could use this for meditation. I mean, these oils, you know, we're doing them in a sequence. One of the things that we did is we took out the need for somebody to process and figure out what's wrong and like how to treat it and what oil. We basically set up like basically treatment protocols and sequences so that if you go through and you treat like with these 4 oils in this sequence, it basically re-educates the stress response, right? And so if you understand physiology, great. And if you don't, it doesn't really matter. Like you're hearing the conversation, so you realize that there's something deeper there, and your difficulty in dealing with anxiety, it kind of gives you a ray of hope of like, this is how I can treat it, because it's not mental. There's a mental component to it, but if you calm down the physiology, then it becomes easier to treat psychologically, right? So you're having to do a couple of different things. And so when we set up these sequences, you don't really need to figure anything out. You just follow the sequence. Just follow the sequence. It will do what it does. And so, first we calm down that initial stress response. Then we go through and we start clearing out the mental components that are the byproduct of that. Then after that, we try to stimulate the emotional faculties and then the mental faculties, like the psychological, emotional, and mental faculties. And so we systematically go, okay, if this is the mechanics, then let's systematically unwind the mechanics to treat, stress responses, PTSD, which actually can also turn into brain fatigue, which means it becomes harder and harder for you to process information over a period of time. You don't process things very well and get triggered simply because your brain is tired. PTSD is a brain fatigue syndrome. Chronic fatigue syndrome is a brain fatigue syndrome. So any comments or your experiences or questions?
So like if you, like I have a trauma experience that
Mhm.
I'm trying to work through. So I would use this to help. I mean, as
You would do all 4 steps. Yeah,
Okay.
you would do all 4 steps. So the first step, the second step.
I can get you a printout.
Yeah. And so if you think about the trauma right now, how does it feel compared to 45 minutes ago? Like if you think about it right now.
I'm calmer about it, thinking about it now.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so somebody
Because normally
here.
I wouldn't have actually even said anything to you.
Right, okay, so that's a beautiful point. So somebody here said, she's sniffed 2 of the oils, and so she's saying, without going into details, she said like she has a trauma that she's dealing with. And so I said, as you think about it, what do you notice? And she goes, I feel calmer about it. And she goes, normally I wouldn't have even have brought it up, but I said something to you this time. And when she thinks about it, you can tell like she's like thinking about it. She's not responding to it. So a lot of times when you think about it and you're starting to feel that trigger, that anxiety, that fear, or you're reliving that traumatic event, that's your physiology. It's simply, it's locked in your body. That's what it is. You can release the emotional component, but your body keeps generating it over and over again. And so your body is not letting go of the event, right? Because it never wants to experience it again. So you have to just go and re-educate the physiology. Then when you go back and you start looking at, okay, what is really going on here? Then you can go through and look at it from a psychological point of view. Like, what are my lessons learned? Like, what can I process to do this? Can I let go of this situation? Can I let go of this event? Yes.
What is it if you are doing this type of work and there are tears, but you don't necessarily feel the emotion, but there are tears?
Great point. But it's not. Is it?
It's not sadness.
Okay.
It's almost
So
like
she
an
brings
automatic response.
So there's a psychologist here who brings up a really good point. So she says, what happens when you're going through and you're processing this, and then there's tears, but they're not tears of sadness, right? When you have realization from the mental faculties, or when you have like a higher emotional experience, or when soul energy is increased, you'll have realizations. You're starting to touch the unconscious. So those tears are actually the body being shocked. And the body is actually being like, ugh, like something's different. And what's starting to happen is the unconscious is starting to say, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. And this is what really happened. And the body, calm down. You're basically your unconscious, mental unconscious aspect is starting to say to the body, I'm the boss. In a very nice way. It's saying, I'm the boss. Let's let go of this agitation. Let's go with this. But it's doing it almost not through like soothing. It's more of like a realization where the body has to shift really quick. Because you have homeostasis, which is your body's drive to maintain balance. But at times, your body shifts into what you call allostasis, which is it has to shift and adapt. It has to change. It only stays in that phase for a little period of time. But when you have a realization, when you have those tears of realization, or if you have those tears and you're just like, I don't know, I call them happy tears, but they're just tears of gratitude or tears of something. They're not sad tears. Your body is being forced into allostasis, where it has to shift and change to keep up with what's starting to happen. And so from there, your body starts to react differently. Yeah. It happens in meditation, it can happen in therapy, it can happen in doing like self-reflection.
Energy work.
Yeah, energy work. It can happen in a number of different modalities. Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that we like to use next is, this is very activating to the heart, and it's very activating to the crown, which is increasing your ability to access your higher faculties and the ability to transmute, right? The ability to transmute. And so the one that we use here is hyssop. Hyssop is a very old school, like here, do that. It's a very old school herb, and it's a very old school essential oil. It really has fallen off the medical aromatherapy realm over the last couple of decades, but we use it quite substantially in medical aromatherapy. Not super big in the US, but in Europe, it's a much bigger plant that's used. So in the Old Testament, in the Jewish tradition, King Solomon says, purify me with hyssop, make me white as snow, right? Purify me with hyssop, make me white as snow. So if you look at this from an energetic point of view, when you're purifying, what are you purifying? You're purifying usually the body. Your mind and your emotions are naturally conductive to the higher soul. Your body is naturally resistant to the higher soul. It's naturally resistant to the higher soul. So this is the struggle between the higher nature and the lower nature, right? This, you could call it a predicament of sorts, is what accelerates the development of the soul. It is being able to recognize who you are, right? I'm not the body. I'm not even these emotions or the mind. I'm actually something greater, where you're starting to watch the emotions. You're starting to watch the mind. You're watching the body, right? You're starting to say, I am that I am, basically. And so when you're able to start achieving this, it's not a conflict between the higher soul and the lower nature. It becomes a harmonious interaction between the higher soul and the lower nature. And so when King Solomon says, purify me with hyssop, make me white as snow, if you were to clairvoyantly observe somebody having a greater connection to their higher soul, the energy that comes down is brilliant, brilliant electric white. Like it's just this super brilliant white light, right? So this brilliant white light is what he means by make me white as snow. Even if you look at the creative aspect in nature, it's basically divine light or the descent of the Holy Spirit. And depending on what tradition you're from. Hindus call it something different, Buddhists call it something different. by going through and doing this, you're activating the upper centers. You're starting to be more of who you are than reacting to something that is happening, right? You get to start to make choices, right? So remember, the third stage of stress is forming a strategy. So you're starting to activate these faculties. So you go, okay, what am I going to do about this? Sometimes there's no action needed. Sometimes you go, well, I maybe need to not hang out with that person anymore. Maybe I need to address something, whatever it might be. But it's not from a place of crisis. It's a place of like, yeah, I need to resolve this. It's a place of like calm, just like, yeah, an inner knowing of I need to do this, right? So they're taking long, slow, deep breaths with the hyssop. Hyssop's good for physical pain, and hyssop's good for psychological pain. So if you take a few more long, slow, deep breaths with the hyssop, and then how about a couple of you guys share your experience? How do you feel? Yes.
I feel forgiveness.
So I forget what's your name?
Katie.
Katie. So Katie says she feels forgiveness. She's already feeling like the heart's already becoming activated. Really, when you quiet down your physiology, you get to be kind of who you are. Like the issue is sometimes your physiology is holding you hostage of sorts. And so, you know, you get to go to that place where like, yeah, I could let this go. And you had something to say.
As you're talking through all of this, I'm trying to think of the people that have caused me a lot of trauma in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So smelling this one right here, instantly, like my heart is like racing right now. Like, yes, we got this. We were so awesome. Like those people do not matter. Those people ain't shit. Like,
Right.
yes. I don't know a lot. That's exactly what I'm right now. That's awesome. Hype now.
How about for you? How's it feeling for you?
Normally, I'm the opposite. I from your first share, I don't like hugs. I feel like I wouldn't punch someone if they tried.
That was a funny share. So somebody here said that normally she doesn't like hugs, and right now she goes, "Yeah, with this, I could feel like I would punch somebody if you tried to hug me."
Usually, usually it's a very quick react unless I'm taking like alcohol or something
Right,
like
right,
that has suppressed that.
Right.
Then usually I'm very quick to
Like no.
push
Right.
a little bit.
And how are you feeling? How are you? It's okay. If you think back to the event or events, like how do you feel about them right now?
And I'm more calm and processing of that processing.
Yeah. So you're probably like you're not sure what you're getting. You're probably processing something in there,
Right.
in unconscious. Yeah. So the person here that said that she had a trauma and she was feeling less reactive, like she's starting to process something right now. So she's like she feels calm, but she's like not sure. So think of it like this. When you want to bring something new in, or when you want to do something different, you can't do it from a place of certainty. You can't, because as soon as if you're certain, then you go, no, I already got this wired, right? So you almost end up going to this place where like, I'm not sure, I'm not certain, I'm not quite sure what's happening right now. That is starting to shift something internally. Because for something new or something different to come in, it has to be from a place of uncertainty, right? So think about it like this. Really, when we think of our repetitive thinking, and then the emotion that kind of comes in with it, really what you're looking at is the play of yin and yang, right? Yin and yang, if you look at it from an energetic point of view. The thoughts are a lot like the structure or their yin, right? Their yin. Yang is the essence that passes through the structure, right? And so what happens is you have a set of thought processes. Okay, I had this happen in the past, I've had that happen in the past, I had this repetitive thinking, and that structure attracts a certain kind of essence to come through, right? So when something goes to the extreme, when you're looking at yin and yang, when something becomes excessively one to one extreme, like excessively yin, it produces yang, right? It produces essence. When something becomes essence, it produces yin or structure, right? So when you're going through and you're trying to process something, it's very hard to say, well, focus on the essence, don't really focus on the structure. You know, you're just going to be left in this place of like, what does that even mean? Like, I'm supposed to focus on the essence or the feeling, or, you know, you don't have anything to hold on to, right? So even when you're going through and you're processing like say a trauma, for example, you're processing it. And even as you go through it, you're inhaling these oils and working with the plants, and you keep thinking of the event, you're kind of pushing it to the extreme, but you're doing it in a way that's very non-reactive, right? Because what you're doing is you're also calming down the body, calming down the physiology. So you've changed the structure, you've changed the thought process. Everybody here is like, I feel calmer, I feel non-reactive. One person said, like, I feel like a place of forgiveness. And the person with trauma was saying, like, I'm not sure, and I feel calmer, right? And so what's happened is, whatever that structure is, it attracts a certain kind of essence that is similar. So when we have the repetitive thinking that's always the same, we're always attracting that same essence. When we're sitting and grinding on ourselves, oh, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, I'm bad at this, I can't change, I can't do this, you're attracting a certain kind of essence, right? So by going through and doing this process where you calm down the agitation, it starts to change your mental processes. Then what starts to happen is the structure is changed, so it attracts a different kind of essence coming in, right? So what she's saying is like, I'm not sure what I'm feeling, is there is a new essence that's coming in. So now she's starting to have a shift in thought processes and a shift in emotions, which means that then you'll kind of experience essence for a little while, and then boom, there'll be a new set of thought processes. And then even then you take them to the extreme, and then boom, it attracts an even new and different type of thought processes. So you keep going back and forth, but you keep upgrading every time you do it. So if you think about it, you're going in a circle, but instead of going a downward spiral, you're going up. And so even as it goes up and up and up, even the downward part of the circle is still higher than it used to be, right? If you're going like this and you're going up and up and up, even though you go, okay, I'm feeling the trauma again, you're still way above where you're at right here, right? Because the spiral is moving upward. Does that make sense? So does anybody you guys aren't getting to experience the citrus oil, sorry about that. But do you have any questions with where we're at with the process?
If anyone, I'll just say anyone that's want the sequence, just contact
Sure.
me and I'll send them the sequence.
Yeah. Any questions? No? You guys are so quiet.
None online at this time.
What's it?
None online at this time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I feel it's like I have a couple.
See what I've got here. They got their questions answered. They were talking about oils.
Okay.
So we're good. Thank you for.
So the last one, the last phase, the last stage will be actually the You can use a single oil, but we're going to use a blend that was actually made specifically for PTSD. So can we give them this? So one of the things that you can do also is you can actually think of the event as you're inhaling. As you think about it, you know, just keep inhaling as you think about it and just let it kind of shift and change. Just keep taking long, slow, deep breaths. Take a few more long, slow, deep breaths. And then just be still. You keep your eyes closed for a second and just let it incubate. And then take some more long, slow, deep breaths. Just maybe 5 or 6 long, slow, deep breaths. And then just be still. And so what do you notice?
I don't know.
Yeah, right? You're just kind of in a place of like, feel calm and still, but you're not quite sure of your thoughts. It's like something's kind of shifting. You're actually, it's mechanically transmitting the lower emotions. You know, basically the lower emotions are the physiological emotions that what triggers us. And so it just basically kind of shifts those and transmits those. How are you feeling?
Like I'm forgetting this for myself.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. How long ago did that? You can just say a long time ago,
Long
or
time ago.
okay.
Childhood.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a lot to process.
Yeah.
But
What's the name of the blend?
Splendor. Yeah, it was made actually for treating PTSD. It was originally for veterans coming back from be it Iraq or Afghanistan. So it took about 19 versions.
One second. I got it. Gotcha.
I was saying that I don't know if it's because it's at the end of the combination or or if it would have the same effect just by itself.
Both. Like some people will only use the last one to treat it, but the combination actually, it's like it sets it up and then the last one just comes and just knocks it out.
It's just very
Calming, soothing, and so the thing is like what I would have the veterans do is, they would see multiple things that they can get out of it. And again, it's their physiology saying, don't ever get yourself in this situation again, right? And so one of the things I would have them do is we'd get to this stage and I'd go, okay, sit and think of those thoughts. Like actually literally go there. And as they would go there, they get like flushed out. You're basically flushing it out of the physiology. And then emotionally and mentally, you can move past it or let go of it. But you have to get it out of the physiology first. Because the physiology will just keep, think of it like this. Your lower mind is based on your senses. And even though that trauma is not right now, your body is holding on to it, so it still feels like it's happening even right now, even though you have the distractions of the day. There's still a little piece of you that's still there experiencing that trauma. So it keeps sending the senses, through the senses, it keeps sending those impulses to your brain, and your lower mind just keeps going, we got to prevent this, we got to stop this.
I was gonna say, I'm really good. I've learned how to shut that down.
Oh, good for you.
I don't know if that is good for me. So, again, trying to process that and relive that, go there, it's too harmful, it's too hurtful, so I just shut it down. Like I just down.
Right.
Avoidance.
So like when, like the thing with the heart is like when we keep something negative out of the heart is really good at transmuting something. Like it will transmute and let it go. Like it let go, right? But when we keep out the negative things, we're also keeping out the positive things too. Like when we shut it down, it's like I'm gonna keep out the negative, but that also means I'm keeping out positive as well. So part of the difficulty is if we can't get it into the heart, we can't transmute it. We can't let go of the physiology, but sometimes that has been the coping mechanism because it's so big, it's so painful. Like it's what do I do about this, right? And so even when you're transmuting it and the physiology is still agitated, you go, okay, I transmuted it a little bit, but it's still there, right? That's why PTSD is so hard to treat with the vets is, there's brain fatigue that goes along with it, but they don't look at it from a point of view of physiology. They look at it from a point of view of just this person has a psychological issue. Right. And it's really a byproduct of the physiology.
Interesting.
Yeah. And if you calm that down, your mental faculties, you get to make choices. But until then, you're constantly, it's like you're shackled to a tree and you can only get so far because your physiologist just goes, no, I'm not going to let you forget. Your body does not want to re-experience that again, even though your mind knows I'm out of that situation. I'm not a little kid anymore. I'm not driving a car anymore. I'm not in Iraq anymore. I'm not, whatever it is. And so, it's just.
I'm at a point in my healing journey where I've done all this trauma therapy work and I have this, new way of thinking that has made all the difference. I catch myself still constantly feeling it in my body. And like, this is so crazy that this is happening right now that I was invited to this because this is exactly what's going on in my head is, okay, my brain knows X, Y, Z, but I still feel my body tense
Yeah.
all the time,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
that I'm holding my breath
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
So
That's again, it's the first and second step. Like it's the tension in the smooth muscle and the tension in the gut. And so, like when you're holding your breath, it is either through constriction or just feel something. Like you're trying to disconnect from that feeling in the body. So the tendency is to start holding the breath.
how would you recommend using this?
Just like you were doing, like you just
do it like every day?
You could easily do it every day. For like really advanced cases, we actually start to direct them through different parts of their body so that you systematically go through and calm down the digestive tract and the respiratory tract. But when I was working with the vets, they're not going to go here and here. If I start saying, put it on this energy center or something, they're like, yeah, that's not going to fly. I would just have them breathe in. And so the way that I would tell them to do it is breathe into areas of discomfort in your body. So a lot of times it's still the gut. And still they'll feel like tension in the chest, or they say that it would even feel tension in the throat, the lower throat. And so it's just like wherever you feel discomfort, just inhale the oil and put your attention into the discomfort. You're just putting your attention on the painful part in your body. And it's doing the same thing, but without the new agey terminology.
Okay.
And so, it's basically like if you're talking to a French person, you talk French, and if you're talking to, English person, you speak in English. And so, sometimes we would talk in physiological terms, sometimes, in energy centers and things like that. It just depends on who your audience was. So usually when I teach, we go through the energy centers. But when I go into a more clinical setting, we do change the verbiage a little bit and just say, breathe into your body, breathe into the discomfort, breathe into the abdominal cavity. You just say things like that, and you would do the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. But we have a little protocol, like we have a little kit that has a protocol that you can go through, and it has that component. So even if you just did the first 1 and 2, you'd probably notice a difference.
Okay.
Are there any harmful or possible side effects of doing this?
With doing it with inhalation, so the person was asking, do we even have somebody still in there?
Yeah, we definitely do, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So somebody was asking, is there any harmful side effects? So with essential oils, you have basically 3 different ways of applying it. One is through the skin, right? One is through ingestion. So you put a little bit of water and take it internally. And then the other would be through inhalation. And so when it goes through the skin, it's getting into the bloodstream. About 40 to 50% will hit the bloodstream, right? When you ingest it, there are some things that you can use, like the tarragon, you could use in water to calm down the gut to an even higher degree. We don't really usually suggest a lot of internal because there are certain essential oils that, because of their potency, can actually become toxic when taken and ingested. There's not a lot of them, but there is a handful. The other issue in the American market is that a lot of essential oils can be adulterated. The market has changed drastically over the last 10 years, but when I first started 30 years ago, there was no medical grade oils in the US. We had to buy things from Europe. And so the market has changed dramatically. So therapeutic grade oils are around, but if they've been manipulated even a little bit, you don't want to get the chemicals in your body in that particular way. So the safest way, and actually the most effective way, is through what we call sustained inhalation. When you put it in a diffuser in the room, you're getting it, but you're not getting all the molecules that are coming out. So when you go through and you inhale and you hold the bottle in front of you, or here we're using a little strip, like a little strip like this, and you're inhaling, those molecules are breaking down. It's a volatile oil, so it's evaporating. So molecules are starting to hit the air. And so as you inhale, you're getting in some of those molecules that are going in through the respiratory tract and hitting the lungs. As the blood passes through the lungs, the molecules are starting to mix into the bloodstream, and you're starting to get it into the bloodstream. Probably the most effective way is usually about 70% of the oil is actually hitting the bloodstream. And so when you're doing it through inhalation, it's really hard to go wrong with that one. The one that you can go wrong with is ingestion. You know, skin, you can cause like some irritations on the skin, things like that. But taking something internally can be the area where you could go wrong. And so most times we just say, let's just straight up treat it with inhalation and then directing it.
What about the age? Are there age restrictions to this? Sorry, I'm asking.
No, you can ask all the questions you'd like. Like usually 8 and under, we try a softer approach. And so you don't have to have quite, like here we have like the 4 steps. Usually with that age, you don't have to do quite as much.
Okay.
So the thing that we use for treating things psychologically with children is Roman chamomile. It's much softer. For an adult, it's not strong enough unless you mix it with other things. But for a child, it helps them move past the trauma. Like it helps them to process the trauma and move past it. And so things like lavender and mandarin are very antispasmodic and very relaxing to the same systems. And it's not that these wouldn't work, but they might be a little too strong for a child. So you could have them take it like a breath or two, or you could let them go have at it with like the lavender and the mandarin and the Roman chamomile. And so that's usually what we use there. In extreme cases, there is one essential oil. It's a little bit pricey, but in extreme cases, there's a oil called Melissa, or also known as lemon balm. And severe trauma cases, we would use that. But you dilute it quite substantially. So, you could rub it on the body or just have them inhale it, and it would calm down like fits and things like that. So, Roman chamomile actually will do that a lot of times too. But if it's like a really extreme case, then you got to break out the big guns. That also works for adults, but children usually just need a bit of a nudge, where sometimes adults, there's been so much more conditioning that's happened that you need to use stronger material. You know what I mean? We've had to live with it for way too long. Yeah. And so, as the child gets a little bit older, a little bit bigger, you can shift them over to the adult approach. But under like 7 or 8, I usually, sometimes even at 7, you could shift them over to the adult component. But definitely 1 through 6. There's a softer versions. There's like a handful of oils that's used to treat a wide range of things with children. Yeah. So like when you're dealing with trauma with kids, Roman chamomile would be super, super useful.
Someone asked, what is in the Splendor blend?
Splendor, I've done so many, I have to look it up. So in the blend, so in the blend is cypress, fir balsam, and juniper, and then black spruce, two types of mugwort, sage, ironbark eucalyptus. Ironbark eucalyptus smells almost like lemon. It's a very strange eucalyptus. Frankincense. St. John's wort. And then rue. And so, you know, in the writings of King Solomon again, he makes a reference in the Old Testament and in the Jewish writings that he makes a reference to the glory, and then he mentions cypress, fir, and juniper. And glory is, in the Kabbalistic teachings, is tied to the 3 energy centers for transmutation. And so there is a center that's for physical transmutation, which is opposite your navel on the back side, and it's associated with like your adrenals and things like this. Then the emotional transmutation is the back heart. And then to transmute things mentally, you move it to the crown. And so by moving it through these 3 energy centers, you're transmuting it and letting it go physically, emotionally, and mentally. So this is tied to, in the Kabbalistic teachings, it's tied to this energy center known as Hod, like H-O-D, Hod, which means glory. And like when they say glory be to God, basically that's stating or symbolizing the transmutation or letting go of the lower nature and giving it to God. And so when you work it through those 3 centers and you release out through the top of your head, it actually starts to move up to where the incarnated soul is located as, you know, you either let go of the issue, or if there's a pattern where you need to learn the lesson, it registers as lesson learned. So this is based on science, Jungian psychology, and then esoteric principles, the approach that we're doing. So, and lots of clinical time. lots and lots of clinical time. But any other questions? And if you just keep having questions, fire away. Anybody online have questions?
No. Just thank you. Very, very enlightening.
Let's do this. So for the ones who don't have the oils at home, we still want you to have an experience, right? So let's have you do this. Because remember, there's multiple ways to the top of the mountain. Think of something that bothers you. Just whatever it is, you're not going to have to share or talk about it. Just think of something that bothers you. And as you think about it, the best that you can, put your awareness on your heart. Okay, now just completely let it go. Just let it go. Okay. Now, put your awareness on your low back, opposite your navel. So the back side of your navel, but on your spine. Take long, slow, deep breaths. You're not thinking about anything. You're not visualizing anything. Your awareness is just on your low back area. You're taking long, slow, deep breaths. Now, move your awareness to the area between your shoulder blades. This is the back heart. Your awareness is between the shoulder blades, and you're just taking long, slow, deep breaths. Put your awareness on the top of your head. Move your awareness about 3 inches above your head. And just let go. Keep your eyes closed. Just let go. Put your awareness on the low back area again, the back side of your navel. Move your awareness up to the area between your shoulder blades, your back heart. Move your awareness to the top of your head. Three inches above your head. Just let go. Silently say, I am that I am. I am that I am. Think of the situation again and see if it feels different. What do you notice? Anybody streaming want to say how you feel?
Yeah, I think you can comment. Anyone? For the Facebook Live people, I can bring you on camera. Do you have a comment?
How about you guys? How do you feel? You guys just had the oil, so it made it real easy.
Yeah, I totally was gone.
Yeah.
It's gone completely. Hi.
be honest.
Yeah, I know.
Really, yeah.
So this starts to move things from your lower centers to your upper centers. Your lower centers are tied more to your physiology. It's not that the upper centers don't have physiological components, but they're tied more to your psychology. And so it just helps move things from being just completely body driven to starting to integrate them and process them psychologically. And then when you're saying I am that I am, you're starting to identify with the soul, where you're starting to say, okay, this issue that's happening, I'm not that. I am the soul. So you're actually starting to disentangle and detach from the particular issue. The entanglement comes from the physiology.
Are there, I don't want to necessarily say autoimmune issues that come from consistent, constant stress?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
yeah,
this
totally
manifest that
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
so
totally.
if we're focusing on this and I don't want to say resolving, but maybe letting it go,
Mm-hmm.
does that alleviate any of the physiological ways of like autoimmune issues?
It can. Like sometimes with autoimmune issues, so she's asking, can autoimmune issues be a byproduct of this? And it can, because really what you're looking at is an autoimmune system, or the autoimmune response is the immune system starting to turn on the body as an outside invader. And so basically you have a hyper vigilant immune system that has become so vigilant that it doesn't even recognize the body and starts attacking the body. And so when you like, let's just have a scenario. Say your boss comes in to you and screams and yells at you for 5 minutes and then turns around and leaves. So if you were to stand back and go, okay, let's watch the body instead of listening to what he had to say, let's watch the body. Is you have tensions that start to happen in the body that feel the threat. Even though your boss isn't going to hit you, your body's not so sure about it, right? Your body's like, I don't know about that, right? And so your very first response to any sort of outside invader is a part of your immune system that's tied to fighting viruses, bacteria, and actually cancers. And so this system can become hyper vigilant over a period of time through agitation. And then eventually it becomes so hyper vigilant that it actually turns on the body. And so there's a couple things that we use to unwind autoimmune issues, like non-specific to a particular type of condition, because there's all kinds of autoimmune issues. And now there's even starting to be just these general, you're having the markers, but you don't really have a condition. But if you get tested, there's a bunch of markers in the blood work, right? And so there's two particular oils that we use. One is, it's in the Artemisia family. So it's very similar to mugwort, but it's called Sweet Annie. And Sweet Annie is very good at calming down the immune system and making it like regulated. It doesn't really strengthen the immune system, it actually regulates the immune system. And so, one of the things that I noticed over the years was like a lot of times when people would get treated for cancer or viruses, that the virus is an organism, like it has an intelligence, same with the cancer. It is something that is growing and evolving within the body. And sometimes when you would go after it with antivirals or with treatment for the cancer, that it almost like heightens the survival response in the organism. And so sometimes the viruses get worse. And so many years ago, we started using Sweet Annie to calm down the immune system, but it still makes the immune system fight, but it doesn't make it super hypervigilant. But what it also did is it calmed down the viral response. like it calmed down the viruses. And then we also used it to treat some cancer patients. And so, you know, like a perfect example, which is like what they started doing the vaccines for, the HPV. We had several cases where a person had tested positive for years. We went through and did the treatment, and in 6 months they started testing negative. Like, it wasn't present anymore, because we treated them with Sweet Annie, and then we treated them with an antiviral, and the virus just didn't fight back. Like, it just, you know, knocked it out. So Kristi just sent, like, what was that, about a month ago, that they're actually looking at Sweet Annie for treating COVID.
It's about time. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about like homeopathic
Yeah.
things like that.
And so, you know, we use it in actually even in like the psychic protection class, you know, just because, you know, you have people who are stressed out, they're yelling at you, you're in places of high agitation. We use it to calm down the immune system. And so that's one thing that we use. And then the other thing we use is it's a very specific type of time called Moroccan time. And Moroccan time, the difference between, because there's like about 8 or 9 different types of time, depending on what virus or bacteria you're dealing with. And so Moroccan time is actually very good at regulating the thymus. So the thymus is tied to regulating the response of the immune system attacking the body. And so we just do like a 1-2 punch. And, you know, there's severe cases where other things need to be done, but usually low to mid-range things, a lot of times that will knock stuff out and start to reverse it. And even really severe cases, it depends on how bad they are. You know, sometimes I'll see lupus, like say in the last stages, and it's sometimes, yeah, they're a little too far gone. But I mean, they're usually within a few months of passing or something, you know what I mean? And so, but usually we can calm down the symptoms quite a bit. But if it's not in a super extreme scenario, we usually can start reversing some of it. You know, I've had lots of cures of autoimmune issues that simply went away. You know, a lot of times what they say is you were misdiagnosed. And so, well, because they're not used to those things going away.
Right.
So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
so
that's
they'll
what the
say,
medical.
yeah, so they'll say, oh, you were
pressure
misdiagnosed, but it's,
Yes.
you know, the blood work comes back different.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, fire away.
Because I have another one.
Yeah.
So if we have, so I could literally go to you for so many things. Is that how I would pursue it? Is if I have 2 autoimmune and, you know, ADD and all these other things that I, you know, might have. Would I just like schedule with you, or
Yeah, you know, I don't do a whole lot of, like, I teach so much now, it's hard for me to do a personal session, but what we can do is send you like protocols, like how to go through and do it. And so one of the things with the protocols is also, even if you didn't have the oils, like sometimes you can follow the protocols and actually do other modalities even in its place, because mechanics are mechanics. So as soon as you understand the mechanics of what's happening, a lot of times there's multiple ways you can treat something. You know, you can go about it a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be just with oils. You know, a lot of these conditions that we're talking about, I've usually treated with 4 or 5 different kinds of approaches. It's just that the thing that's really nice about oils is that, you know, think of like people who might be a little bit resistant to sitting down with a therapist, or you have somebody who, you know, a family member, and you go, hey, I'm learning this energy modality, I'm going to work on your energy centers. And they're like, I don't know about that. Right? You know, you get people who have preconceived ideas of whatever, that already makes it a little bit hard to treat them. Mm-hmm. But if you stick a bottle of oil in front of them and go, smell this, they'll go, and I mean, cut through all the BS like really super quick. And it just became a really super easy way to treat people regardless of where they came from. And so, you know, we're looking at like trying to treat some of the shooting victims, you know, from the mass shootings and bombings and things. And, you know, we treated them a couple different ways, but then the oils were a really easy way to treat because, you know, people come from different economic backgrounds, different social backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. And you go, okay, how do we come up with a therapeutic approach that
Respects all that.
yeah, like how do you do that? Stick a bottle in front of their face, you know, literally. So like when we would have those situations, I would just give the group the stuff for free if they would take it. A lot of times they actually wouldn't take it, you know. And so we were using it in a corporate setting, and you know, in those kinds of settings, people are usually pretty practical. And I used to work for this contract vehicle that helped with mergers, like companies doing merging. And, you know, I was just doing like a little tiny bit of consulting. I was not a big piece of anything. But, you know, usually when they were having some personality issues with different people who were key people, I would just come in and say, these are strategies, or this is what the problem is, or, you know, I would just watch them for a little bit and go, you know, X, Y, Z, this is what you need to do. And so, you know, sometimes these were engineering firms and things like this, which had a lot of like ex-military guys in them, you know, so it wasn't like, you know, foofy anything. These guys were very, and so we'd put a bunch of hyssop in the diffusers in the room, and they'd walk you, you know, there'd be a big boardroom, and there'd, you know, be, you know, all this weird smelling stuff, and then they go, ugh, what's this? And you go, I go, this is what I always tell them. You know, tell them it's to prevent colds and flus, which is true, but it's not why it's in there, right? It's to reduce the back and forth and conflict. And so they'd go, oh, what is this? And you know, it's to prevent colds and flus, and they'd go, oh. Immediately. You know, and so, you know, I had this one situation where these two companies were just at each other, and you know, we really loaded the room up with hyssop and did a bunch of things. And I called the CEO after the meeting, and it was this woman, and she just kept going, I've never seen anything like it. And I went to the bad place. I was like, okay, tell me what happened, you know, because these were like all military guys. And she just kept going, I've never seen anything like it. And I was like, okay, just tell me how bad it is. And she goes, no. She goes, at the end of the meeting, they all hugged. They were all hugging. She goes, I'm pretty sure there's a barbecue happening on Sunday. And the two guys that were so at each other, I think they're going fishing next week. You know, and it was just calming down everything so that they could communicate. That's all it was.
So it's a short, so I guess what so it's a short-term approach with long-term effects? Like,
yeah, like, well, in that particular situation, it was basically taking them, I mean, they weren't listening to each other. And so they were really saying the same thing, they were using different verbiage. And so really what we just needed to do, like if you've ever seen two people argue, like nobody's listening to each other until everybody calms down. And then you go, okay, I hear what you're saying. This is what I heard you're saying. This is what I need, right? And so you kind of do a version of that. We couldn't ever get them to that phase. They were just always at each other's throat. And so the hyssop makes people less reactive, and it starts to activate the higher faculties. So in the meeting, instead of getting triggered, they kept listening to each other, and then they kind of realized we're saying the same thing. So the problem was already resolved. We just couldn't get them to listen to each other, to go, this is actually good for both of you, right? Like me going, I'm trying to come up with a reason why this is bad for me, and I couldn't, right? This was actually very good for both sides, but it was a shift and a change that neither side thought they wanted. But when they sat and I listened to it, they were like, it would be stupid for us not to do this. And so we got them from that lower physiological response to just a higher psychological response. And then they went, oh, this is good. And so they became, they compromised. You know, they just kind of listen to each other. Even just listening to somebody else sometimes is a compromise in itself. And so that's all it was. It didn't make anything like different happen. It just allowed something to happen that wasn't being allowed because of everybody's physiology. You know, everybody was just getting triggered. You know, and those military guys, they don't do fight flight. They just do fight. Like they have no flight. Like they stand their ground. I mean, they do not back down. It's trained out of them. And so, you know, when they get triggered, they just like hunker down, and they're like, you know, they're like bulldogs.
You know nothing about that, do you? Her husband's like 6'4", like 300 pounds, and he's scared to death of it.
That's funny.
I just want to.
Not to tell too much information on you there, Daniel,
Okay.
but you know.
So thanks you guys for joining us on the stream and everything, and I hope you enjoyed. And you guys, you want to say some things for your center?
Actually, I would love for you to share what you've got going here this weekend, actually.
What we're doing is
Pain.
pain. We're doing a multifaceted approach to pain. And so we look at the different types of pain and then the effects on the physiology. And so a lot of times pain is not the issue, it's a set of responses. And so we're looking at pain management, not just at the pain source, but the other things that contribute to pain in a very easy to understand, easy to follow approach to going through and identifying the type of pain and then following a set of simple protocols to go through and treat it. And so, and then we'll talk about some different conditions and things like that. And so we did kind of a series where we did this multifaceted approach to pain. And then we did psychological healing, which we're actually teaching next weekend and down in Alabama. And then the next part would be sleep and memory, like treating sleep and memory, because, you know, originally I presented all of this all together at once, but it was just too much information for a weekend workshop, obviously to everybody else but me. But a lot of times what happens when somebody's in pain, it starts to produce anxiety or shifts in the person's moods. And then eventually it turns into brain fatigue, which starts to affect the memory mechanisms. And the person usually develops a sleep disorder in a short amount of time. And so we systematically go through and look at, in each class, the set of mechanisms that has to do with that. You don't need to know physiology, you don't need to know aromatherapy. We just go through and kind of lay it out for you of how to identify and then how to treat, and give you examples of what to use, and you can go from there. And so, you know, things like arthritis is covered, things like sharp stabbing pain, which is like usually like a disc issue, or, you know, something to do with the spine that radiates into a limb or into your legs. And then the most common type of pain is nociceptive pain, which is just dull, achy pain. And so, yeah, we go through and learn how to evaluate these things, and then how to treat them without having to learn physiology to figure things out. So,
Thank you.
yeah, it's based on a lot of years of clinical time and research and development for other modalities, and working with physicians and psychologists and things. So I always liked working with professionals in the field, so that we came up with an approach that was validated. You know, it's like one thing to say, oh, I feel better, I feel lighter, but be able to change something on a blood work or through a psychological like evaluation sheet, that's doing something. So we always like tried to do something along that line. So.
Oh, thank you. This is Kristi Forrest speaking. So for anyone on Facebook Lives, if you want more information, you can go to plantpranaoils.com and check out the classes available. There's more detailed information there. And then, of course, you can contact me at Kristi, k.forrest7@gmail.com. I'm happy to pass on information and assist you with anything. And we want to thank our hosts, Jessica Tanzel and Katie Gangler at Healing Within Louisville. They have a fantastic facility here, and they offer a wide range of healing, massage, counseling therapy, readings, energy healing, all the above. They have some great programs here. So.
Sounds like you have to go to the website to check out the menu.
Pretty much.
That's right.
Yeah. Go to Healing Within. So again, thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us, and I'm happy to clear things up or point you in the right direction. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.